computer, and as soon as I hit record, oh no, as soon as I share the screen here, let me share the meeting minutes. Okay. And then whenever I do that, Zoom moves everything around. Okay, yep. So for the size, there we go. Okay, so welcome everyone to the September 15th iteration of the MicroProfile live Hangout. This is the normal live Hangout, although I think for a while everything is going to be working group edition. As we begin to move towards forming a working group. So if you are on the call, please click on the link in the chat and add your name to the list of folks attending the call under contributors. Listing your organization is optional. It is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes, so please help me out. And I may ask folks who bring up certain comments to also add them into the notes themselves. Okay, so the first topic, we have a special guest. A guest star, Paul Buck and Sharon. We've kind of reached a major milestone with the working group charter. So Paul, if you would like to kind of unmute and kind of give us a status update about the working group charter.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the working group charter was submitted and received executive director approval last week. And with that, we posted it to the web and then initiated the community review on Monday. So that's part of the working group process. The first step in the proposal phase is to initiate the community review, which is to run for 14 days or so. And in the email that was sent out yesterday, feedback was requested for the end of the month. And the discussion is expected to take place on the new mailing list, microprofile-wg@eclipse.org, which I would encourage you to join and watch the discussion, participate in the discussion. My experience with working groups is there's a little bit of chatter that comes when the community review happens, but not too much. It's a great opportunity to share the news with the broader Eclipse community that the working group is getting underway. So if they're interested in joining, they know how to get involved. And if there is any feedback on the charter or the working group in general, that's generally where it is expected to take place. Now, that mailing list is kind of essential for the working group in general. Just a bit of a sidebar on that. But before I do that, I do want to congratulate everybody. I want to congratulate you all for it's been about a year. This process got kicked off at roughly code 1-ish time frame last year. So it's been a long journey. So yeah, I'm very pleased to see that you have all got to the point where the community review is underway, and from my perspective, creation of the working group is imminent. So well done. So no doubt, lots of challenges and hard work lies ahead, but an important milestone for MicroProfile as it can now become a working group and have a specification project. So part of what's essential for a specification project is the intellectual property framework, which is one of the drivers for heading us down this path. So with the MicroProfile working group, a mailing list, it's an open list, it's archived, anyone can subscribe, but they do need to be a member of the Eclipse Foundation, which sets the initial or the sort of the foundational stuff with regards to committing to the Eclipse contributor agreement. So it's the sort of the base step, if you will, in the IP framework. So that is why we set the mailing list up and why we need the community to kind of shift over to it for areas of governance and project related topics, so that things snap together and work from an IP perspective. And of course, the existing mailing list lives on. It's a great community asset. It's where you discuss a lot of topics today. So I just put that out there as something that is part of next steps in shifting into to a working group.
Oh, this is Amelia. Sorry, Paul. This is Amelia. I saw the announcement go out to the Eclipse community. Did it go out to members, to organizations listed, or did it go out also to committers?
It goes to members, and it goes to the contact that's in our membership database.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically goes to roughly one person or so for each organization.
Correct. I just wanted to ask you, is that strategically done because there are organizations, the ones that can join and this is formal, or is this just how Eclipse has always done for working groups to be the announcements to go live?
Historical. It's our process.
Okay, I just wanted to ask you.
Yeah, but the mailing list is open. Anyone can join. So if anyone, and the URL, of course, it's not posted on the website yet, or sorry, it's posted on the website. It's not linked off a page yet. And you'll see by the end of the week, what Sharon is working on is with the infra team is getting a tile on the Explore Working Group page. And on that Explore Working Group page will be a link to that, will be a tile for MicroProfile, and it'll link to the charter as well as the 2 participation agreements. The organization participation agreement for corporate members and the individual participation agreement for individual committers that aren't employed by companies that have entered into the organization participation agreement. And that was all based on what we did with Jakarta, which David will be quite familiar with, and Kevin will be as well.
All right, so, and I apologize, sometimes you won't always see me looking at the camera because I've got like multiple monitors and everybody's over here, the document's over here, right, and you guys are here, so I apologize. Michael had a question earlier.
Yeah, I did also have a question too on the new list. If we'll do Michael's question, and then we'll come back to that.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. Michael's question is on the charter and providing feedback. I might have given him probably not the best advice. So I think you should ask Paul directly. Michael, go ahead. He's looking towards unmute.
I was actually subscribing to the new working group list. I was in the middle of drafting an email to my Java user group distribution lists that the draft is now available for public review, and there was no link on the page to submit feedback. But I guess this MicroProfile-WG email list is the way to do that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And it's the draft charter that typically the next step for the draft charter is that it goes into the initial steering committee meeting once formed. And one of the tasks of the steering committee is to do a final review of the charter and approve it. So at that point, it goes from a draft charter to a recommended approval charter, and then it's requested that the executive director also approve it, and then the charter is shifts to be a 1.0 charter, or it shifts out of draft mode into being the charter for the working group.
Okay.
Awesome.
But that is after this 14-day review.
That's correct. Yeah, it is. And so I'm not sure how much time we've got today for this discussion, John.
Well, I'll be honest. I think as much as we need. One of the things that you saw me typing in a spreadsheet, right? So I'm trying to create a list, and I'll bring it up a little bit later. Create a list of action items that we have to do 2 things: form the working group. So you saw me add some of your comments kind of as action items, and also release MicroProfile 4.0, right? So after Q&A around this, what I'll probably do is switch over to the spreadsheet. I would love to have your feedback on like any major missing items around Eclipse process. I haven't even gone through the Eclipse process yet, to be honest, and filled out all of them. But if there's anything blatantly obvious, your feedback would be awesome when we get to that point.
Okay, now, was it based on the spreadsheet that I had put together?
No, not yet. I have to weave that in as well. A lot
Okay.
of this is just a brain dump as well. But I know that you have your checklist as well. What it really started out with is I was kind of listing, well, what do we have to do from a MicroProfile spec perspective, right, in order to release? And then I started adding in dependencies for the Eclipse Foundation checklist, which I'll float in. But that's
do you want me to walk through that timeline that I put together?
I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. David, sorry, but before we do that, David, I think still had a question.
Yeah, I was just curious. So on the new list, is that, I see the archive is public, which is fantastic. And you said joining it is open to the public as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as
you
you're
have
a
to
member.
be as long as you're Eclipse membership in this case is basically clicking is member on of the a community member.
So basically, you have to have agreed to the contributor agreement, or?
Yep.
No, okay.
Go ahead,
I
Tanya.
think it's
Feel free
only
to
So I
correct me.
think it's
Eclipse
a
account.
public list. It's a public list. So all you need to have is the account with Eclipse
Yes.
Foundation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you just need to,
So
you can log
no,
in. click this
exactly.
subscribe button.
you need
Yeah,
to log
yeah.
in. Yes.
Yeah.
And we
And
can
then-
discuss offline, because I don't think we have time here, what conversations do we want to have on that list? And what conversations, if any, do we want to have in our current community Google group? Right? Do we want to split them up? Do we just want to do everything in one list? This is discussion for later.
Yeah.
But for formal discussions, we're going to begin, to have them on the working group mailing list.
Well, I'm assuming we'll have to have votes on the archived list
Well, exactly. Yeah.
at minimum.
We don't have the time right now, but I'm thinking that
I just wasn't finished. So I did do the subscribe, and it said you have a pending request. Is there a human being that moderates people joining?
Don't think so.
Me. I was
I'll-
open.
Yeah,
I can keep an eye on it. If it doesn't automatically go through, I will push them, but I suspect
I-
they'll go in a couple of hours or so.
I was just curious if that was an automated thing or a.
It should be, but I can keep my eye on it as well, David.
Okay.
if you're logged in, then generally it goes through automatically.
Yeah, I logged in, subscribed. I got the same message that David received, but then I got an email saying, welcome to the
Okay.
list.
Okay. So it's just an automated process that's a little asynchronous. Okay.
Little latency.
That's fine.
But the thing is that I subscribed yesterday as soon as I saw the email, and I still don't have the approval email. And it has been 24 hours, almost.
Okay, let me take a look at it, Amelia.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
All right. Move on. I'm good. Thank you so much for answering those questions. I was just curious.
Good questions. Thank you. All right.
All right, Paul, if you want to if you want to share the screen, go ahead, take it over.
Okay. Okay, I can't initiate until you stop.
Until I stop, I have the power. There we go.
Okay. Okay, now this is a spreadsheet that I based on one that was used for standing up other working groups. It kind of evolves each time. The dates that are in here some of them were just made up by me. So, don't get overly concerned with what they are. They need to change based on what they need to be and what they should be. But what I've got is pretty much an ordered set of steps that takes us towards the initial steering committee meeting. And some of them can be reordered based on what needs to get done and when. So we posted to the charter. Community review is underway, which puts the working group into proposal phase. What we want to be able to do when the working group is in proposal phase is work together to recruit new members. So typically there is pitch deck that can be used to go out and recruit members into the working group. And it turns out that John has started to work on one. So which I think is great to have that sort of a consistent set of messaging for going out to potential members. Membership pipeline is needed. These items do tie back to the Eclipse Foundation working group process. There is a pipeline. It's been shared with us, and I expect everybody on this call knows what the membership pipeline is. Some working groups actually formally have a spreadsheet for their pipeline to kind of track opportunity. And of course, the best recruiters for new members to the working group are existing members of the working group. Okay, and then we all work together to recruit members, and what formalizes the membership in the working group is the execution of the paperwork. And there's paperwork for organizations and for individuals. So we have an individual working group participation agreement and a participation agreement for organizations. And they will be linked off the web on the tile that is on the Explore Working Group page, which I kind of jumped over right there, but that'll likely show up by the end of the week. And we've also created an external drive for MicroProfile. And this, anyone in the community, anyone in the working group that needs access to this can have access to this drive. So right now you'll see the participation agreements are in there. The timeline that we're looking at now is there, as is the PDF version of the charter that was posted to the web.
Is this about the drive, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Is that located where all the other projects folders are located? Can we do a copy onto the MicroProfile folder? How do we make sure that we have an easy traceability to the documents here without being lost with bookmarks?
Okay, so the shared drive exists in the Foundation's Google Drive space, and so
how do we get access?
Just send me your email address and I'll give you access.
Okay, so we have, so the Eclipse Foundation has this drive. We've got a drive where we've kind of been tracking just all of our community stuff. There's actually two drives. There's a marketing drive, and then there's one that I've been storing a lot of these docs in, like that spreadsheet that you just saw, and the prospectus and stuff, right? I kind of have one. So I'm trying to, figure out in my head, like, where should we be putting this stuff? And it's owned by the MicroProfile account, right? Yes. So what documents, are kind of in your mind required to be here, like you have the prospectus and stuff, the participation agreement and things like that. And what might we want to host in our other drives from your perspective?
That's a good question. In this drive, we definitely want to keep participation agreements and anything governance related to the working group. I mean, the other drive, the drives that you've got. So let's maybe what we want to do is part of setting up a working group is also to create the working group resources and services checklist. And that, I expect, is a place where we could finish the discussion that we're having now, and we can identify those drives as being infrastructure related to the working group, and we can work out any considerations that we need to in that context. Sharon, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think that makes the best sense, and then we can work through it as we go. There'll be certain things that we do need to share, but I think it would just make sense to pause right now. And then as we do the services checklist and go through that, we can determine what's what at that point.
So what would be helpful is to know, is there a representative of the working group or representatives of the working group that we could collaborate with on that checklist? Don't need an answer right now, but
well, wouldn't we just do that openly on the working group list?
Yeah, like
It's not really our style to like peel people off in one or two groups and work on things offline.
And do things in the vacuum. We don't do that.
Yeah.
One of my
no problem with that. No problem with that. I mean, there's nothing. It's just more for convenience. And if you wanted to at least take a stab at starting it, but I don't see any reason why this can't be done.
So
either on the list or on a call.
Yeah. So Paul, we will use the working group for this, but we can quickly eliminate a bunch of things in the list here. We will have only one steering committee that is in charge of everything. There is no specification or marketing. There is only one. That is the steering. So those ones can be deleted. And if you send this access to the link to the working group and say, okay, community, this is the Excel sheet, and these are the help that we need to onboard this community formally. And you can say, you have the checklist and things that we can help you unblock so that we can be on time in 14 days. That would be amazing. So using the working group, we will do that. I think that's the best way to go based on your feedback and Sharon's.
The other thing is if you send the link to the doc on that working group email address, and then when people want to view that doc, and then they can request access. In this case, it's much easier to manage. So you can decide whether to give access right to who is interested. So the other question I have, if you go back to your drive, so the doc is a participation agreement. So am I right to say is every one of us need to sign this form again, or what's the requirement for this one?
Okay, so these agreements are for joining the working group, and so there's two of them. There's the working group participation agreement for organizations and companies to become corporate members of the working group, and then there's one for individuals and for individual committers, and that's for individual committers, for committer members that are not employed by somebody, by an organization that has done the participation agreement for organizations and companies.
Right.
And so we go ahead.
Sorry, currently we have individual committers, I think. Do they have to assign this participation agreement, I mean, after this one is published? So basically, in the future, maybe the individuals joined, and then they were voted into the committee, and then they can sign this agreement. What about for the one individual, committers? Already individual.
Yes, it's important for them to sign this agreement. Right. And associated with this agreement is an employer consent form that they will need to take back to their employer to sign as well. So we really need to proceed in parallel here, both with organizations to get them to join through the working group participation agreement, and for committers that aren't employed by one of those organizations to follow down the path of the individual participation agreement.
Paul, Sharon, can we add the employer consent agreement? It's a 2-page document. Can we add it into this folder as well?
It's linked off of this one. So pretty sure there's a link in here.
Yeah, there's a link in the participation agreement.
Okay, excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
We can certainly include the link in the drive, of course. That's not a problem.
What we're going to do is we are going to write the steps on, separate the groups, the memberships, and then you say you need to sign this and this, and it will be super easy and consumable. So that will be on our wiki. When we create, we need to create a tab in the MicroProfile website, and it will say specifically what to do, super quickly, simple, so there is no, you know, losing or suggesting or being lost.
Yeah, and there is some, there are some assets that help committers through the individual participation agreement that we can provide links to. And that was put together back when we did this for Jakarta to make it as easy as possible for committers on spec projects in Jakarta to be able to work their way through this process.
So I'm assuming at a certain point, if people aren't able to sign the individual participation agreement, are they going to have to get removed?
Yep.
How much time do we have to reach out to people?
I think we've got as much time as we want. I think we don't have as much time as we want, but we've got I think it definitely needs to be done before specs go final. And it sort of depends how fast we're sprinting towards a release with ratified final specifications.
So we need to have everyone have their individual participation agreement signed and or removed if they don't sign it before we can issue a final spec?
I believe so.
Can't they?
Think that's going to be a problem?
Can't they run in parallel? I mean, like basically if we get the working group fully signed, what if we get like 80% of it done and 20% of the people are still working on it? Their votes wouldn't be binding anyway. None of our working group agreements allow committers of individuals. But basically, individuals don't have the ability to vote on the specifications anyway.
Yeah, so let me.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
Go ahead.
I was going to say
Karen.
this. So this is about ensuring that we have the necessary IP flows, right, in the specification.
Right, but if they don't sign and they're removed, that doesn't ensure that any IP that they've contributed.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't impact it.
Yeah.
If
So
we remove a bunch of people so we can release a specification that doesn't get us greater IP coverage.
Yeah. So good question, David.
Yes.
Let us get back to you on that one.
Okay.
It's a good question. All right.
Hold on. Ed has a great question. This is about the link in the documents you are sharing. Can we have it be shared in the working group today, Sharon or Paul? Can it be sent? I know many of us are struggling with the approval to get accepted into the mailing list, but can we get it out, the access, not only to the agenda, but also to the forum today? Ed asked this question.
The Google Docs space.
Yeah, the Google Drive.
The Google Drive?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. With this list, we need all of the access to be sent to the working group mailing
Yeah,
list.
I was thinking about what's the easiest way to do that. If
Working
share
group.
And then people click on it, they don't have access, and then we can grant them access.
Mm-hmm.
No, with Google Drive, you could just right click and say anyone can view.
Yeah.
Right. When you click on the share button,
okay.
just highlight the folder.
Okay.
Click on the share button, and anyone can view.
Okay.
I think what I'll do is I'll take this the checklist that I've kind of created. Maybe what I'll do is add in a tab for MicroProfile 4.0 because I kind of want to keep the two together. And I'll be honest, I'm gonna be a bit of a what's the right word? I'm gonna be
hard ass.
Pretty. Thank you, hard ass here.
All
right. And
stickler.
I'd like to. I'm gonna keep the editing rights to the checklist. To kind of maybe me and Kevin, assuming Paul even gives me that right to edit the top of the checklist.
Yeah. No, you've got
Okay.
editing rights. Yeah.
Okay, and just because it's going to get too unwieldy if we got everyone sticking AIs in there, and I kind of like to keep it manageable. Obviously, you can via whatever forum, the mailing list or the Google group, probably the Google group. we could start a thread on this about AIs to add and assign people and folks. All right, so that's all I have on that, I think.
Okay, I think in parallel, as people arrive on the working group mailing list, then it becomes more possible for the discussions like that to shift over there. So this is a timeline, a spreadsheet that I put together basically on your behalf. So there's nothing in here that is carved in stone. It does kind of map onto the governance, but feel free to edit as you see fit, John. So
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So finalize paperwork. In order to formally stand up the working group, we need participation agreements. And many of the organizations have already executed participation agreements before with the foundation. So there's nothing special about this one. It's just another one for MicroProfile. In many cases, it's just another working group's name crossed out and participate and MicroProfile in there. So it's pretty standard.
Good question. I just wanted to understand the requirements on the recruiting aspect, so that it's not started. I believe.
So what I will do is send out a copy of I think the initial step of the recruiting is sending out a copy of the participation agreement to companies and organizations in the pipeline, asking them to review and execute the agreement. That to me would be the initial step of recruiting to get that process underway.
Okay. But that is after we have seen the agreements and make sure that the name is correct. And
that will be us seeing.
And good catch on the draft. It was like
Adobe comparison. You see what I mean? Adobe
by the way, that has been adjusted while we've been on the call. The charter has been adjusted.
Love you, Sharon. I cheer you with wine, but I don't have the wine.
Refresh. Look at that.
You better be careful. You're setting a pretty high bar. We're now going to expect everything to happen this fast.
No, well, it has been
Thank you very much.
We can do
that. One was not supposed to happen, so I felt personally responsible to get that adjusted ASAP.
Thank you, Sharon. Cheers with wine later.
Yes, absolutely.
There you go.
Okay, Paul, I think you have a couple more to go through.
Okay, yeah, I do. So once we've got the paperwork back, then corporate members will be asked to name their rep to the steering committee, and then knowing who the reps are, an initial steering committee call can be scheduled, and that is something that the steering committee members need to decide how to facilitate it. We're happy to schedule initial call. If you choose to do it in a community call, that's up to you.
We do everything open.
That's totally fine. Mm-hmm. We know who the community members are, so for votes we know, or the steering committee members are. So we will request and then record on behalf of the community. One of the initial tasks for the steering committee is to do a final review and to approve the charter. And
so I have a question on that. I apologize for interrupting. How is voting done for formal steering committee votes? Is it done via the mailing list? What's the infrastructure, I guess, in process to use that infrastructure to conduct votes?
Well, many steering committee votes happen in the meeting, and votes are recorded in the meeting and then published in the minutes.
So it's up to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, David. Yeah.
I have a quick question for the steering committee reps per corporate members. Is that 2 or how many?
It's one. There's one voting member, and generally there's an alternate.
Mm-hmm. Right, 2. Okay.
Yeah.
But 1 vote.
Yes. Yeah, 1 vote. As per the charter.
What happens if you vote differently? So that's solve the problem. Thank you.
I have a question about this one. Working groups, they have the primary and alternate, but some with MicroProfile, as I have seen it in Jakarta also, there is up to 3 people listed in the mailing list. So because people want to go into vacation and all these other things, so MicroProfile has not set up a limit to just do the primary and secondary. Is there a limit on to having 2 or 3 that we do not know based on what we do in Jakarta?
Our meetings are going to be public.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really even matter.
Yeah, I know, but I'm asking.
You can have 100 participants if you'd like.
Yes, but I'm asking for what it will be listed. The formal members will be listed in the MicroProfile tab, saying these are the numbers. So do we have to stick with 2, or can we do 3? I just want to know if this is an option for working groups.
Have 2 alternates.
Yeah.
I think if the steering committee wants to have multiple alternates, then I don't think there's a problem with it. What's important is that it's documented, because from a voting perspective, we're expecting and governance perspective that the primary, if there, will vote. Otherwise, it would be an alternate.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
And
to clarify, they are voting on behalf of the member organization. Is that correct?
Yes, because that's who they're the primary representative of the corporate member of the working group.
Perfect, Paul. Thank you for confirming that we can have 3. I'm most interested on MicroProfile and pushing MicroProfile to have 2 alternates, just because it's just healthy and it makes us much more scalable as organizations.
If we end up needing it, I mean.
Yeah, Thanks.
All right, so then there's the nomination and ballot process for the committer reps. And that can either be done by the foundation on your behalf, or it could be run by MicroProfile. Mm-hmm. Objective is to do it in an open and transparent way. One of the responsibilities of the this steering committee is a steering committee with spec committee responsibilities, and we'll just refer to it as the steering committee, but know that it's also the spec committee. The steering committee in this case needs to conduct a vote to once we're into the incubation phase and out of proposal phase, the steering committee votes to adopt the EFSP. And the steering committee also needs to initiate a ballot to convert the MicroProfile project to a spec project. And it's expected that ballot lasts for 7 days, and that it's done on the public list. So John, kind of connecting into what you're doing from a specification, this kind of gets the working group to the point where, from a spec perspective, from a process perspective, the EFSP has been adopted and MicroProfile has been converted to be a spec project.
Okay. I think so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull over to my slides here.
I have a really simple question here. So Paul, for the steering committee reps, are they eligible to be the committee reps as well? Or they are kind of, once they become a steering committee rep, they are not qualified to be the committee reps?
So is it the case, so certainly if they're nominated as or if they're identified as a corporate rep to the steering committee, then they're on the steering committee. Now, so there would be no need in that case for that individual to be considered as a committee rep to the steering committee. But from a corporate perspective, a company could have a position on the steering committee from their corporate affiliation with the working group. A committer member could also be nominated and become a rep on the steering committee in that path as well. I think in Jakarta, they've taken the approach where at least for the strategic members, they've stayed away from nominating their committers into the committer position on the committees, but that's more of a guideline than anything that's coded into the governance. So I don't know if that answers your question, Emily.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are the participation?
Okay. Go ahead, Ed.
Go ahead.
Are the participation agreements any prerequisites to holding that first vote?
Yes. To be eligible to be a committer rep, then you either need to be a committer member by virtue of being employed by a company that has entered into the participation agreement, or you need to be an individual committer that's signed the individual participation agreement and have a vendor or an employer consent form on file.
I guess I was thinking more about it from the intellectual property of the people that have contributed. Is that I mean, I know we had a fair amount of due diligence to do with Jakarta. I'm just curious if there's any analog to that here.
No, I mean, in this case, the prior art that is these specifications is what it is.
Okay.
Well,
So all right. Okay. Thanks. And if you've got any other questions, feel free to get to me, get to Sharon, and no doubt there will be further discussions. So don't hesitate.
well,
don't leave
we'll
yet.
Work through this together.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay. No, I wasn't going to leave yet, but I stopped sharing.
Okay. Okay.
Before you
Yeah,
go,
I kinda
John,
took over the screen.
before you go, John, let me just say to Paul and Sharon, and you know, you have been facilitating, especially you, Paul. We have recorded before saying thank you to you when you were not in the calls. Yvette and Tanya did a really good job in one call when we were asking them questions that they couldn't reply, and they say, "We're here as contributors, we cannot answer." So then we use the mailing list, and that was really helpful for us to trace the information and to have it in writing. Now we have a Q&A that has started for MicroProfile. That will be a part of the tracing of the process that we have just gone through for the last year. Thank you so much for, you know, the Eclipse EMO has signed itself to do this kind of job, to be a facilitator, a mediator between any project community and the Eclipse Foundation. You have been in the middle, and it's not an easy task to be a clear communicator. A lot of us we have been exhausted. We have been frustrated with the time. It has been exhausting to the point, but we are here today, and this is a value that says that moving things to the open, being transparent and saying, hey, you know, I appreciate it. I am frustrated with this. How can we do X? Works. And I personally want to thank you and the EFO because we moved everything to the public and that finally worked. And I am the first to say and be extremely excited since Friday that we are here today. And I want this recorded so that everyone knows that it's painful to go through this process and we have suffered a lot because it's time consuming, but we're here and it's fun. So thanks, Eclipse.
You're welcome. We're excited about what lies ahead and glad to have you know, collectively reached this milestone together. Cool.
Well said.
Yeah, yes, and I think we're a bit of a unique situation, which is why some of this might have been, you know, taken longer than we would have liked. But hey, we're here, like Amelia said. So I just threw together this spreadsheet. Don't take it too strongly. I was just laying down things. You can see what I kind of started with the bottom, right? The release road number. I don't know if you could really. Here, I'll just have to do it this way. Oops.
It's clear.
Is it? Okay, good. Row 17 is kind of where I started. Well, in an ideal world, maybe we could put a stake in the ground for October 30th. Looking, you know, at the other checklist, you know, that's not probably going to be feasible. We'll have to figure out when we think we can release MicroProfile 4 because we have some dependencies, and we knew that, right? So I was just trying to go backwards, and I stuck a date in, and it didn't work out. So. And I'll weave this in probably into the other spreadsheet. So I'll delete the spreadsheet most likely after I copy everything over. But one thing that was interesting that came up when Kevin and I were kind of chatting a little bit, and that is a specification requires a TCK and it requires an implementation, a compatible implementation. We've always taken our platform specification, so MicroProfile 3.3, MicroProfile 4, as it's just an aggregation of all the component specs, right? It in and of itself doesn't have a TCK. It in and of itself doesn't have a compatible implementation. So as we think about releasing MicroProfile 4, you know, Kevin and I were kind of chit-chatting, you know, as we recognize this, like, I don't know, late yesterday, it's like, well, maybe, you know, do we consider it a specification that doesn't have a TCK? Because it's literally just a wrapper around other things. It doesn't have a spec per se. The spec pretty much says it includes these other specs. And there's no requirements around interoperability between the specs. So there's no value add around that. Or do we basically say we're only going to do the component specs, and then those are voted on, and MicroProfile 4.0 is really just a marketing bundle, right? And we say MicroProfile 4.0 is a marketing thing of all these other specs, right? Because the spec process requires a TCK and a compatible implementation. I think it was Ivar. Was it? Comment? I'm done.
What was the question, John?
So the question is,
sorry,
well, this is an issue. Well, let's put it this way. How do we vote on a MicroProfile 4.0 spec?
Yeah.
When it's not really, it's never been a spec per se, you know, in that it's just been an aggregation of all these other things. So it is and it isn't, right? It is in the sense that we've called it a spec and it just includes all the other specs and that's it. But there's no compatible implementation. We've never really felt like it was voting on things. It was just an aggregation. It is a spec only in the sense that some things are in it and some things aren't, right? Like LRA is not in it, or well, that's a bad example.
Yeah,
GraphQL is you know, isn't in there. Outside of that, it's like there's nothing there. It just, so how do we resolve this in terms of a voting, like I approve MicroProfile 4.0, right?
Well,
if there's no spec.
I might be looking at the wrong thing, but can we just align on how it is done at Jakarta, where we have the platform?
Well, we don't have a situation like this over there, right? So
yeah, I thought we would.
So all the specifications that we have, even a platform specification, have things to assert, right? So the EE spec has a lot of features above and beyond you know, the individual component specs. So there are things to write a TCK about that are not just, it's not simply a composite of the component TCKs. On the MicroProfile side of the fence, there are no requirements like above and beyond. The requirements are you need to have all these things. These things each have their own individual TCK, and there is no monolithic TCK, which is actually something that we're trying not to do on the Jakarta side of the fence. We're just not there yet. So we're kind of in the ideal situation where our umbrella spec doesn't really have anything to assert. All of the assertions are properly in the component specifications. So, I mean, one way would be we just call it a spec, but there is no TCK. Or if there is a TCK, it's a zip file containing all the other component TCKs.
But that could simply be the answer, right?
So
to solve the situation.
Right. So my view is since the MicroProfile platform spec is aggregation of the individual specs, so that means the compatible implementation means you passed all of these individual MicroProfile specification TCKs.
Right.
So is yeah. So
if you filed the 7 certification requests you can be certified.
So yeah,
Something
8.
like Yeah, what? Yeah,
MicroProfile 1. The
Right.
other thing is also it has a 4 Jakarta E ones. Like
Yeah.
Jackson CDI, JSON B, and JSON P.
Ken
So
Finnegan
that-
started a thread on that a while ago, and it didn't end up where we needed to have those things passed, but we could certainly revisit it.
So I guess, from a Eclipse, process with, Paul and Sharon on, it's an interesting situation where, we don't really have, it's not the same thing as Jakarta. It is something very different. So really,
Wayne Beaton would be a good
Okay.
consultant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he'll have some good feedback for us. When we had these discussions on the specification committee on the Jakarta side of the fence, I mean, he was definitely there and valuable. But a lot of the times he kind of looked at us and said, well, what makes sense for what you guys are doing?
Yeah, the way where I wonder, I agree, is a specification as per the EFSP, as we led off in this discussion, is a spec document and API, a compatible implement at TCK, and a compatible implementation that passes the TCK. So in this case, if we're calling it a spec and it doesn't have those, then it's not a spec as per the EFSP. Could be a profile, could be a collection of specifications, but in and of itself, unless you define it.
It sort of is a spec because it says it has requirements. It's just that the assertion that the requirements are tested elsewhere. But it does say you must implement this particular version of this spec, that version of that spec, version of that spec. And so, if somebody implements different versions, they are not compliant. And,
right. So
I think it sounds like you do have a TCK then, because the TCK doesn't need to be a program to run. It could be you need to run these 7 tests and pass them.
Right, exactly.
That's kind of the assertion.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like in the EE side of the fence, there is a monolithic TCK, but there's also a CDI TCK. The CDI TCK is not included in the monolithic TCK, but you still have to pass it. So in our situation, we simply have no monolithic TCK, and they're all like CDI.
Right, and you also, the API is a bomb.
You still have to pass them all.
Yeah. So and perhaps you do have a specification in the sense that you do have it's by reference. The TCKs are by reference.
Sure.
And in order what you at the end of the day, what you want is to be able to make clear statements about compatibility.
Right.
And that's something that when you step back and you implement the specification, which could be subsets of it or just individual specifications, then you want to be able to make clear statements of compatibility.
Right. And also, John, we have a brand concept that I believe we're going to have to make a compatible brand logo, and we're going to have to attach it to something.
Yes, that's I might have stuck that in there. I said marketing bundle, but yeah, there has to be, if we're gonna have a compatibility logo, yeah.
So basically the umbrella specification would be the thing that it's attached to, and the umbrella specification happens to be in an, I'll call it ideal state, where all the individual TCKs are king. And it's basically like if we had on the EE side of the fence, scooped out all the individual TCKs from the monolithic TCK, put them cleanly in their own TCKs, and we're simply aggregating them together by requirement.
But then you also have to have a compatible implementation that implements all of them in order for us to release.
Do you think that's going to be a problem for us?
We haven't really talked about it. I mean, it's something for us to talk about. And I also say that we're going to talk about it later because it's the top of the hour.
Okay.
Like the way I segued into that. Anyway, and I apologize.
No need to apologize. It's a great topic.
We're at the top of the hour. Yeah, it's a good topic. We're going to need to solve this, which is why I wanted to bring it up early, because it just kind of ran into it. It's like, oh my God. So I will see, hopefully everyone.
Let's have a working group call next week, because we have stuff to do. And this time, let's show up. And we have this action item. John, can you add it to the agenda so that we can already start working on it? I have some feedback on the marketing plan must be approved by the steering committee. You can do a dash after my name. The same with the budget, and a few other things are missing from the list. So do provide access. Yeah.
I have a better idea. Add them as action items in the meeting minutes and assign me to them.
You know, I love that.
So thanks everyone. We'll see everyone in a week, same bat time, same bat channel. Thanks again for Sharon and Paul joining the call. It's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. Bye, everyone.
Bye for now.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. We did it. Okay, John, when you tweet